Hello, I'm Mike from the Intuitive Lens. Welcome to part 3 of the Astons racing case study, taking an image from RAW to a monochrome final image. So open the image, and in part 1 we did some basic editing in the RAW stage, in camera RAW, and then we did some noise reduction and masking in part 2. So here we are, beginning part 3, converting to monochrome. And you can see there are areas of the picture here which I'm going to use as kind of my controls. The shadow details under the fenders on both the cars, the amount of transparency so you can see through the driver, and the highlighting on the bonnets and on the last driver's helmet and the decal on car 48. So my first job is to convert the profile from an Adobe color space to an sRGB color space, because we're going to use this on the web in the Intuitive Lens gallery finally when it's finished. And I'm going to use Silver Efex Pro to assist the conversion into monochrome. So on the left hand panel you see various kinds of styles that could be applied, and this is one of them, a neutral starting point. It's called neutral. I'm just highlighting here the areas that we're going to be concerned with, particularly whilst we make this conversion. And here's a comparison between the original color image and the neutral conversion before we apply any modifications to that. Silver Efex Pro provides a number of film emulation conversion types, and you can see as I page through them here how subtly or not, sometimes it's quite dramatic, the changes are in the simulation of the film. Here you can see the difference between the Panatomic X50 ASA rendering, quite contrasty, deep shadows, versus the somewhat lighter treatment of the Plus X 125 ASA treatment. Okay, so let's zoom in a little more, and here I'm interested in preserving the contrast and the shadow detail for the three cars, and particularly this area of the grille and the highlighting on the bonnets, which gives us our modelling, and the curve of the track. Now these simulations often give you a starting point that includes simulated film grain, but we don't want that in this case, so I'm going to just switch that down in the film types indicator. If I pull down the sensitivity section, you can see that this is the characteristic curve of sensitivities to various colors of light for this simulated film type. And you can see that one of the issues we have in the image is this series of collections on the roof and the bonnets, and the cyan slider is helpful in reducing or increasing the amount of reflected sky there is on top of these cars. And the best way to do this is to show the extremes, noting where you start on the simulation in terms of the original number of the cyan sensitivity, and then moving dramatically in a big sweep from one end to the other to get a feel for the areas of the picture that will be changed by moving the slider, and then coming back to a figure that gives you the right level of modelling and minimum reflection. As you can see, we've still got the bumpiness, this beautiful shape in the Aston, and also the cyan tends to help with reducing reflections on the glass, and so we can see through into the driver. Round about here. Next thing is perhaps to look at the red slider, because we have some red tape over the headlights on both racing cars, and we also have a red grille on the front runner and red spoked wheels. And I often use the split frame comparison here to help get the right level of brightness for reds against these dark backgrounds. So we're trying to simulate the forwardness and brightness and aggressiveness of the red without it jumping straight off the image. So we're using that comparator and the red slider to do that. And now I'm just finessing the headlights using the violet slider just to make them balance better. And now we're going to use another technique in Silver Efex Pro, which is very, very helpful. The use of micro level changes using these control points. Here I'm going to control the brightness and probably the contrast, possibly even the local contrast structure using one of these control points. And the way you do that is to place a control point, adjust its size of influence, and then change brightness, contrast and structure using these little sliders. And if you click on the selector on the right for each individual control point, as you see, the screen goes very dark and you can see exactly the sphere of influence. And then if you turn them on and off individually as they build up over the, you can just see the difference in the image as a whole. So it's probably got that helmet just under control. There's a very bright curb here, so again we'll make the sphere of influence of this control point just large enough to darken the curb without increasing the shadow under the bumper of PUM6. And in order to just check that once again, you select the right hand side of that individual control point and you can turn them on and off and see that is a very good way of controlling particular trouble spots. Now this curve in the track is what I'm after preserving, and I have a very light patch in the bottom left hand corner of the picture here, so I'm going to use a couple of control points without changing the darkness of the shadow under the cars, and just lower the light levels on this part of the track. As you can see, we're able to resize the area of influence and then change the brightness just enough to darken this corner. I don't really want to use a vignetting effect here, so this is the other way to do it, under individual corner control, if you like. And as you see, you can switch all the control points on and off at once and see the net effect on the image. Just about right, makes the cars jump out of the background by lowering that. So we'll now OK that and use that as an extra layer in the final Photoshop image. Just finesse that using some levels adjustments. I think the blacks are solid enough. We might just lift the highlights a tiny bit up to white, just to make those whites jump. And I do that with just a few points of increase on the highlight end slider. You can turn them on and off, you can see the effect. And I'll just compensate for that, thus increasing the overall contrast of the image just a tiny little bit more by using the gamma slider. So turning the effect on and off, you can see it's just quite subtle, but it makes the thing jump that little bit more. So, final step would be to resize before sharpening, and here I'm going to use the best algorithm for reducing an image and change the resolution to screen resolution 72 dpi and create this large enough to go into the blog page. And final step then would be just quickly sharpening because of the reduction. So here I tend to use a 200% preview and modest amounts of sharpening with very small radiuses, so just make a difference. And as you can see, as I press the hand on and off, preview the effect, it's just a teensy little bit of sharpening to finish the image off. And there we are, all the way through to Magic Monochrome from RAW.